especially with government interference and things like that. So in the early 40s, the Federal Communications Commission in America, due to the war effort, halted, due to the war, due to a lot of different things, due to the fact that there were a lot of color, a lot of television signals crowding the air, put a complete stop to the development of TV. Because the spectrums that allows for TV channels to take place was overlapping over each other and was interfering with their radio transmissions as well. So basically, it was a very crowded. Was playing Pokemon in class.
Yo, what? Yeah, who was that?
Don't think I don't know.
So that moment, you fucked up.
Yo, you know when Mr. P was supposed to go.
I know it's raining cats and dogs outside. 1948, the government put a stop to the development of new televisions, especially new stations. Right? Because back then, each channel is operated by a different station. But due to the fact that they found this to be a little bit too congested in terms of the airwaves, so they put a halt to the development of television until their scientists are able to sort things out with the airwaves. So back then, you can see how many airwaves there were. There were basically 82 different frequencies through which each channel was transmitted through. Alright, there were 12 very high frequency signals and 70 ultra high frequency signals. So this we were all during this period of time. Eventually, of course, things get better, the technology gets better, things improve. So after the World War, that's where the boom of television really began, really exploded. Right? I showed you a few slides before that in 1945 there were only 8,000 television households. In the 50s onwards, that number exploded to 35 million television households. Right? And that's not even scratching half of the population of the United States at that time. Alright, so huge improvements and growth in the television industry, and the industry itself was very much modeled like the radio industry, because again, the people behind the television industry were in the radio industry as well. So local stations were connected and affiliated with the same stations that first began radio transmissions, like CBS, NBC, ABC, and so forth. Right? Prime time programs. What are prime time? What do you think is the prime time for television programs? We always hear this term prime time. Afternoon around what time? 7, 8 p.m. Okay. Anyone else? Prime time. What's prime time? When you hear prime time television. 1 p.m. who's going to watch TV? Everyone is at work. Anyone?
Oh yeah, I'd say like around evening, like after everyone comes back from work, so around
8 o'clock.
7, 6.
8 p.m.
Yeah, I was there.
The usual time that the TV industry considers as prime time is usually anywhere between 7:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. all the way until 10 to 10:30 p.m. And that is the slot in which a lot of advertisers priced. They really fight with each other for that time slot, because that's when they know majority of people will be tuning in. Alright, they'll be back from work, they'll be back from school, and they will be tuning in to television. That is why at that time the advertisers, who are mostly very loaded with the resources, were able to produce programs for television. Alright? Were able to sponsor programs, alright, for television. That's why when you see your TV shows, alright, in the usual regular channels, you hear things like, this program was sponsored by this, right? That's because it is these advertisers that paid part of the budget that made this television series possible, right? Independent companies also produce programs, but they were financed by the networks themselves, by the TV studios themselves. These are usually the smaller, cheaper programs that are cheaper to produce, like your Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, or your game shows. Those are very, very easy shows to produce. That doesn't really require a lot of resources. What really requires a lot of resources are your sitcoms and your 1-hour drama series and things like that. Right? Technology began even one step further with the introduction of the video cassette, right? Especially the videotape. The American company called MPEX was the first in the world to introduce this technology for the television industry, for use in the television industry, not for use by consumers yet, because this replaces the film reel that they use in TV studios. So that TV studio cameraman is able to record programs on this cassette, pass this cassette over to the transmitting room, and then the transmitters can broadcast, right, to the people. So by 1960, most programs in the TV studios were recorded on tape, right? Whereas transmission, right, the transmission of television signals mainly went into very high frequency. VHF became the standard for most TV studios when transmitting to the different television households. UHF was still very expensive, was very, has a very small coverage, and not many advertisers were pumping in money for studios that are using UHF. So most transitioned into VHF, right? Ultra high here is actually a lower standard compared to very high frequency, right? And then, of course, during the same period of time, all right, color television was introduced, as you saw in the documentary. Network color broadcast began with NBC producing the first broadcast in color. And color television was only possible for television households for 3 hours per day, right? Because television color, to produce color programs, was still in its infancy, was still at the early stages. And as with most technologies, when it's still at the early stages, it was expensive, right? They still need to produce the equipment needed to ship to all the different households, all right? So color broadcast was made possible, but not many people were taking it up yet because it's expensive, all right? So I'm going to move on into all this golden age of television that's characterized by all these iconic programs that were broadcast throughout that time in America. Right? So the first, we consider the 50s to the 60s as the golden age of television, because that's when television was really gaining ground in terms of people watching, in terms of the kind of programs were introduced that set the standard for future programs, right? So it was a period of growth, a period of experimentation by the technology, by the producers, the content creators, and the TV studios themselves. New types of programs that are talk show based, that are musicals, that are variety show programs were introduced during this period of time. Alright? And also you have all your drama series, such as back then in the 50s and 60s, they were more fascinated with spaghetti westerns, which is your basic cowboy dramas. Alright? All set in the western areas of America. Alright? You talk about the frontier, you talk about the American Indians, the cowboys, and all that stuff. Alright? So that's why you have film and television series like Gunsmoke as one example. Alright? So that was the kind of programming that they had in the 50s and 60s. And of course, with the introduction of color, even more interesting new programs came up. You can see here, alright? We have the Avengers. Right? One of the first, this is not the Marvel Avengers.
Dang it.
The Avengers here refers to the spy series, alright, that was made into a film, that was remade into a film starring Ralph Fiennes and Angelina something. I'm not sure if it's Angelina, I think it's different. So this was the kind of programs from spy series like this to comedies that is based on the fantastical. Alright? So this is the golden age of television still. Alright, we are talking about television growing up to 95% of all American homes. It is ever present in American homes. And of course TV news, from just 15 channels that has news, that covers news, that number has expanded to 30. Alright, that shows you how 15 minutes of news, now that has extended to 30 minutes. With all the different, and of course today now we have 24 hours of television news. Alright, non-stop news. It's crazy. Yeah, sometimes when I tune in to CNN and I watch 6 hours of it, I'm really like half day to this. Because there's just so many information, your brain just basically gets fried from information overload. Right? So I don't know why you need 24 hours of news. I know things happen throughout the day, throughout different parts of the world, but I don't think we need to know it so immediate, right? But that is the reality of news today, right? News is moving at 24 hours, 7 days a week, no time for you to rest on your bed. So that was, so this was in the 60s, in which news programs were now extended to 30, all right? TV journalism was really the big thing at that time, were a respected profession. Not like today, right? Because of the kind of images, the kind of stories that they covered during this period of time, especially with the assassination of President Kennedy, which were captured on television, right? As well as Martin Luther King's civil rights movement, which was also broadcast live on television, right? And also the sending of the first human to the moon. That was also broadcast on television. So these were all the significant milestones in human history that were all captured on camera, on television. And that really boosted up the ratings of television stations and television viewing. And of course, with radio, we have public broadcast radio, which was the National Public Radio. With television, it was also the same thing. The government realized that television is now, quite a pervasive medium, quite an influential medium. So it is important for them to have a channel that is suitable for family, that is suitable for kids, that is educational. That's why PBC was established, right? And PBC was the channel that introduced the world to Sesame Street, right? It's PBC that produced this program. And in the world today, and of course in the US today, Sesame Street is still existing, right? It's still being broadcast in their channel back in the US. And of course for us here, we still get Sesame Street, but I think it's on Disney Junior. Yeah, so on one of the Astro channels, which is for kids under. Also because of the theme of the real world in the 60s and 70s, content creators develop stories that reflect reality. That's why you have programs that emphasizes so much on science fiction. In the 60s, you basically have almost two different science fiction stories that explore about space. Right? You have Star Trek. You have Lost in Space. Right? These were two major series that came out in the 60s that looked into the exploration of space. Not to forget, later on, in the 70s, early 70s, Star Wars was also introduced to the film industry. Right? So these are the moments. This shows you that content creators, that media producers are always in touch with what is happening around them in order to give them that inspiration to create stories for their audiences. Right? And these are the examples. During the 60s and 70s, America was having a Cold War with Russia. Do you all know what is this Cold War about?
Yeah.
Right? It's about the nuclear arms race between America and Russia, also about the space race between Russia and America as well. At that time, it's USSR, right? The Soviets. The Soviets were the first to send a man to space. But the Americans were the first to land a human on the moon. But do you know that in Russia right now, the people there believed that the man on the moon thing was fake. That was the conspiracy theory that is going around. Right? And it's still going on around. So these are the kind of things. So that has been reflected in the television programming in the 60s and 70s, especially with spy programs, with secret spies and things like that, which we can see in Avengers and in Mission Impossible. Right? So these are the kind of programming that were happening during this period of time. And of course, moving on, right? When we come to the late 70s to 80s, there was a growing concern. Yeah, sure, go ahead. There was a growing concern among the public, especially with family-oriented groups that are concerned with the kind of content that was coming out on television that was deemed inappropriate for children and teenagers, that showed a lot of adult-themed content. Even the government agreed with the concerns of these lobby groups, these family and conservative lobby groups, mostly from the Christian fundamentalists, right? So one of the reports that they used was the Surgeon General report in the 70s that showed that there were significant influences of violence among teenagers as a result of watching too much violent TV shows. This was, a problem. So the Surgeon General in the US is basically like the Minister of Health here in our country. So based on this report, it affects the mental health. Alright? It affects the mental health of children, it affects a lot of problems in children due to this. So because of this, the different groups asked for a clampdown, asked for restrictions, asked for guidelines that the TV industry should follow in order to avoid kids being exposed to all these violent programs. Right? If you think these were not violent, they were. Right? Because they show a lot of punching, killing, fighting, and things like that. And also, all of these programs are pretty much very, very adult-oriented. Like Dynasty, you have adultery, you have extramarital affairs going on here, you have conspiracies within the family and things like that. And of course you have, the basic spies. And of course Charlie's Angels has a lot of very sexual innuendo, for the kids and all that as well. So these were all the programs that people were complaining about and so forth, and which resulted in the broadcast policy developed by the government. Alright? So trends of programming, that's where primetime television came into the picture. Because primetime television was set aside for viewers who are adult, whereas cartoon programming were all made to be earlier in the day, because around this time, apparently kids in America sleeps by 8 p.m. or so. So that was just the right time for the adults to watch television. Right? The kids are in bed, the adults can do what they want. Right? So that was the kind of setup. So prime time, these programs were all moved to prime time, and even more adult content, alright, for certain channels that were given the license to screen porn, that was left to 11 p.m. to late night.
Do you have a time frame for that?
Right? So, yes, they have a time grid for that as well. Right? Especially when the cable industry was introduced, because most of the porn channels were under cable television. Specific channels that only broadcast adult stuff. Okay, so that's the history of TV programming. Right, so as TV continues its trajectory of development, from RCA we now have like tons of television organizations and studios producing different types of programs. Fox Broadcasting came into the picture, followed by United Paramount Network and Warner Broadcasting Network. So these were all the new stations and new companies that were getting into the TV market. Eventually today, RCA is no longer in the business of producing TV programs, but what they do now is they still have the technology and the patents that developed today's televisions as well. Of course, as with all the other media industries, those with money survive. Those without get bought over or die off. That is basically what happens with all businesses, right? So the big giants today, I'll tell you about who are the big six in the TV industry of America today, right, in the subsequent slides. But these are basically how big they are. Viacom bought over CBS for $5.4 billion. And Disney bought over the ABC network for $19 billion. So that was how gigantic they are. Alright? So by 2000, cable television network, which allows for TV households in America to receive hundreds and hundreds of channels, was has reached over to 68% of the population. Right? This number refers to those that are subscribed, being to the service. Because cable television at that time is just like our Astro. Right? It is for subscription. It's not free to air. Free to air channels is basically any television channels that as long as you have an antenna and an aerial reception, you get it for free without any charge. Subscription programming is basically the ones that you have to subscribe before you can get that channel. Alright, so that is, and that's what cable is usually all about. Yeah? They are subscription based. So cable full-fledged became the competitor to free-to-air broadcast television. Right? So cable is a way of distributing TV programming to paying subscribers via fiber networks, right? Via the cable. You see this cable here? That's usually the cable that you connect to your TV at the back. That allows you to receive all this TV programming, right? So new technologies continue to drive the market. By the year 2000, at its peak, video cassette recorders was available in 90% of American households. Why at 2000? Because from 2001 onwards, people, the number of people that use, the number of households that have video cassette recorders began to drop. Alright? This was due to the internet, where people are now spending more time on the internet, are now spending more time online than actually bothering about recording. And when PVR came into the picture, where you can actually record a program and save it onto your hard drive instead of a cassette recorder, that sounded the death of video cassettes. Alright? When you have no one else buying video cassettes, everyone is buying VCDs. First was VCD, then then DVDs, and now we have Blu-ray discs and so forth. And now we have online, basically. No one was buying video cassettes. So video cassette production has been discontinued. No more video cassettes. You can only find video cassettes in novelty and antique stores. Certain certain electronic shops still do carry video cassette players, as well as technicians who knows how to repair video cassette players. So if your house still has how many of you, your house, in your hometown or in your current house, you still have a video cassette player? Right?
I don't know if it works or not.
Don't worry, I can give you my technician's number who can repair your video cassette player.
Context.
Alright? So, there you go. Not many of us have a video cassette, and some of us don't even know if our video cassette player is still functioning. So that shows you how, how it has declined from the peak in the US, with 90% of the country having a video cassette player, to literally very, very few. VCR, why VCR was such a momentous creation for the public at that time was due to the fact that with video recording, it allowed people like us to watch our programs anytime we want. This marks as time shifting. We can also skip all the unwanted parts to see the parts that we want. So we can basically skip through all the ads by fast forwarding. And we can go back to the beginning of the show by rewinding. Now this process of fast forwarding and rewinding is what we call time shifting. Alright? Because you are playing with time. Playback and fast forward. It also allows with the introduction of remote controls, now we have what we call the phenomenon of channel surfing, which is basically you skip through different channels until you find one which you enjoy or that you want to watch, something that's interesting. All right? So these are all the phenomena that resulted in new behaviors when it comes to TV viewing habits of people. In 1994, direct satellite broadcast, or direct broadcast by satellite, was introduced. So this was again momentous because this results in this technology is what made Astro possible. Right? All you need is your receiver, your dish, and you get transmissions for TV programming through satellite signals, bypassing all the traditional electromagnetic waves, no longer that you need additional cables that made it happen. As long as your TV set is connected to the receiver, you can receive satellite broadcasts. Again, most satellite broadcasts are also subscription-based, very much modeled after the cable television system. Okay? And next, we have all this new introduction by the American government. All right, the Telecommunication Act is when they first provided guidelines to the TV industry and introduced rating systems to determine which program is suitable for kids, which program is suitable for all ages, and for adults and so forth. All right? By early 2000s, you can also see the difference in the types of programming that is being produced by television stations. In the early 80s to late, to the late 90s, this period of time was marked by iconic family drama programs, family drama and sitcoms. Right? This is the period of time where a lot of iconic series like Friends, like Cheers, like Family, All in the Family, all right, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, all these iconic sitcoms were all produced during this period of time. Okay? Then we enter into the 21st century, the early 2000s onwards, and that's where a new genre of programming was introduced to the world. Reality television. Right? And that's when the quality of TV programming basically slowly went downhill. Because now, a lot of programming that we see on television basically revolves around the life of someone famous. That is basically what marked reality TV right now. That and of course, reality TV competitions. Honestly, however, in my view, alright, this is my personal view of it, when we talk about game shows, that was already reality TV because a lot of game shows at that time was basically recorded live as well, right? It's just that in today's reality competition series, it's much bigger and it takes place over time. But today's programs like American Idol and The Voice and all these programs, they are actually not actually reality. Some are staged, but actually when it comes to the audition stage, those are already pre-recorded. It's already predetermined. They go around interviewing people who has the most interesting stories, then they feature. Right? It's already in one way staged. Alright? There's not much of element of reality. What is really reality is what they claim as live shows. Now the thing with live shows is that it cannot be possibly live. Why? Because a lot of things are actually edited before it actually is broadcasted live. What you see as live programs, there's actually anywhere between 5 seconds to even as much as 30 seconds to a minute of delay, so that they can actually cut out certain parts and then broadcast it to you live at your home. Right? There are also those that are delayed live telecasts, which is usually anywhere between 30 minutes to 1 hour of delay. Alright, not more than that usually. Alright, so the big four networks, as you can see, the big four includes Fox and NBC, as well as ABC and CBS. Alright, these are usually the big four networks right now. And they usually use now digital medium, alright, because they are transmitting and sharing their programs in partnership with streaming websites like Netflix and Hulu, because they know that majority of viewers are now spending more time online than actually watching television at home. If you're technology savvy, most of you would have rigged your LCD television to the computer so that you can watch your shows on the television via the internet. Alright? Such setup is what we call Internet Protocol television, in which basically your television turns into a gigantic computer screen. Right? So and then of course we have now digital video recorders, as I mentioned, alright, where you save your programs that you've recorded into a hard drive space. Right. So one of the sad things, as I mentioned, with the decline of television viewers that are now moving more and spending more time online, there has to be a way in which the TV industry has to cope with the lack of viewers. So what they normally do, alright, as audiences are shrinking, as people are moving away from television, big four networks have to think of new ways to get the people back. And what do? Alright? Reality shows, showing real life dramas. So some of these points have been repeated here. Right? So in order to win back people, to win back audiences, they created real life drama. The term reality is basically a marketing term to give people the impression that what they see is what they get. What they see is happening is actually what happened. Right? It's not staged, so they will claim that it's not staged. It's not, it's not make-believe. It's not a scripted program and things like that. Things were happening as it goes. Now, from a content producer standpoint and from a viewer standpoint, if you are a questioning viewer, if you are a viewer who is very critical-minded and very perceptive, you know that that is impossible. Alright? But they continue to say that it's not. Alright? That it's not scripted and things like that. One of the worst shows that is considered a reality TV to me is Big Brother. Right? Right, so broadcast networks, for a lot of advertisers, they still see broadcast TV as a medium in which they can reach out to more viewers, especially doing special programming like sports, live sports telecasts, especially when it involves big game moments, during news broadcasts as well. That's where a lot of people tune in to catch the news, and of course certain big shows like the television series and dramas as well. Right? So, for example, American Idol in America is still huge, even though it's already very tiring, and I gave up on the whole entire thing at American Idol 9. Now they are at American Idol, what, 15, 16? With a whole new lineup of judges. Right? Okay, let's let's go with a quiz. Let's see how much you know about
Quizzes.